Third-party logistics. In this lecture, we'll talk about 3PL logistic providers. They're very commonly used in logistics, and the main purpose of this lecture is to help you understand why they are used, what is their benefit, what do they do, and what are the pros and cons of using them. This will give you a good understanding of how to think about 3PL related decisions in an organization to manage logistics. Third-party logistics providers, what are they? So the definition is that they're a company that is external. Okay, so if you're Walmart, a 3PL company that you work with would be non-Walmart, it'll be some other company. An external supplier, and they do some logistics functions for the client company. Why are they called third party? What's the third party about? This term originated in the 1970s when you had to do intermodal shipments. Let's say, rail was a popular form of transportation in the 1970s. So you want to ship some goods from your warehouse, maybe to a retail store far away or to another company in another state. So you would need to basically contract with 3 companies. The first company would be a trucking company that would come load up the truck with your product and drive all the way to a railway station, which may not even be in your city, right? Or could be in your city, but somewhere away from your factory. So from your factory to the railway station, the first move, then maybe this company would also load up the rail car, offload the truck, load up the rail car. The second company you would deal with would be the rail company, who would take that rail car to the closest point to the destination address, whichever the closest railway station is. Then the third company would be a trucking company in that destination state, which would come to the railway station, pick up the goods in a truck, and then drive the truck to your customer's location. So not only would you have to deal with these 3 companies, truck, then rail, then truck, and if they're different states, it could be 2 different trucking companies. You would also have to coordinate. The trucking company must pick up and deliver to the railway company on a particular date. The railway company must arrive at the destination on a particular date, where the destination trucking company must go and pick up the stuff on that date. If any part of this is late, then it's your responsibility to reach out to the next part and let them know they're late, rebook to the next time the train goes or the truck goes, and so forth. So not only do you have to set this whole structure up, company 1 truck, company 2 rail, company 3 truck, you also have to coordinate and manage it and handle any delays and do rebookings and all of that and make sure this happens. So that's a lot of work. So there started companies which are called intermodal marketing companies, or IMCs, which went to companies and said, let us do this work for you. We will book the trucking company, then the railway company, then the trucking company at the destination. We'll coordinate all this for you. You just call us this one point of contact, one window service. You just come to us, tell us you want this stuff moved from here to here, and we will take care of the intermodal transportation between point A and point B. So your job is easier, right? And these IMCs were called a third party because the first party was the party that owned the goods, the producer. The second party was the actual carrier, the trucking company or the railway company. Those were second parties, right? But this IMC is this third party who does not own the good, who has no interest in satisfying the customer's need, the customer who we are shipping the goods to, the end user. But they're a third party to all of this, but they're going to make money by helping us manage this operation. So that's where the term third party comes from. Okay. Legally, from a legal perspective, a 3PL is a legal person, which could be a company, which will receive, hold, transport product The difference being that they don't own the product. So whenever a company is transporting products for some other company, storing them for some other company, handling them for some other company, labeling them, packaging them for some other company, then this company is a 3PL. When you handle your own products, you're not a 3PL. When you handle somebody else's products, that is when you can be called a 3PL. So hopefully, that kind of clarifies what really a 3PL company is. What's the role they play? What do they do? So why do 3PLs exist? Why don't companies just do this themselves? The main advantage of 3PLs comes from aggregation. Okay. So if you look at this picture, we see on the left-hand side, there are two companies, Company 1 and Company 2. Both of these companies sell their product in various markets. So on the right-hand side, you see the markets, City 1, City 2, City 3, City 4. And there could be hundreds of cities, right? They could be selling all over the US. And so both these companies need to move their product, which are those boxes you see inside the company, that's finished goods inside the company's operations. They need to move those boxes to those cities. If there were no 3PLs, each company would need to have their own trucks to take the product to the various cities, right? Or at the very least, each company would hire a trucking company. And because these two companies are not coordinating with each other, they may not even know the other company exists, right? They could be in different industries. The other company might not be in their radar. So company 1 and company 2 are not coordinating. So company 1, might call a trucking carrier company, a trucking carrier, and say, can you take this box from my facility to City 3 today? Right? And okay, the trucking company says, yes, I'll do it. And they go pick up the box, and the truck goes on the journey to a City 3. Once the truck has left the area later in the day, same day, company 2 might call the trucking company and say, hi, I need to send this shipment to City 3. So even if it is the same, it could be the same trucking company, they'll send another truck to company 2, you pick up company 2's products, ship it to City 3. Okay, so you can see, right, that two separate shipments to City 3 would happen whether company 1 and company 2 use the same trucking carrier or not, because there's no coordination. Once a 3PL enters the picture, okay, and company 1 contacts the 3PL to handle the transportation for them, company and warehousing, company 2 asks the 3PL to handle the transportation and warehousing. Well, first of all, the 3PL can collect finished goods more efficiently and store them in a warehouse. Okay, and this warehouse is going to be close to the customers. It's going to be close, right? And so the final delivery could be really fast, and also the delivery to the cities could be done more efficiently by combining, different products and different cities on the same route. The 3PL may also have a trucking terminal. So let's say once you go to drop off, the product in the city, maybe the retail store here, okay, it takes 4 hours to offload or 6 hours to offload the goods. It's not that it's going to work for 6 hours to offload the goods. If you go to a retail store when the retail store is closed or is about to be closed, or it's a shift where they don't have enough employees to offload the truck, your truck may need to be there for a while, before the employees who can handle the offloading can come, right? And so or if you go to another warehouse, the warehouse may have a certain shift where there are people to handle incoming shipments, and other shifts they may only be doing picking, for example. In any case, there's going to be the truck needs to be there for some time. So sometimes what the trucking terminal can help is that they have more trailers, which is the part of the truck which actually carries the load. right? So they have maybe 2 trailers per truck, which is the engine of the truck, which actually moves the stuff. And so a truck can leave 1 trailer parked in City 3 here to offload the goods. The trailer can stay here. The truck can come back to the terminal, get another trailer, and do something else. So trucking terminals can increase utilization of trucks. You can do more with the same truck. Trucking terminals can repair trucks, they can be drivers here. So maybe one driver has driven a lot, so that driver can be rested, and another driver can go into that truck and continue using the truck. So there's all sorts of benefits of trucking terminals. So the 3PL, it's worth it for the 3PL to have a warehouse. Why? Because when you combine the volume of multiple companies, there could be company 3, right? Company 4, right? So when you combine the volume from multiple companies, it makes sense to open a warehouse. Okay, it's the utilization is high enough, right? It's cost effective. And when you're handling product from multiple companies over multiple routes, there's lots of efficiencies that you can get here by optimizing the routes and optimizing the utilization of your resources like trucks. If each company did their own thing, they would have fewer opportunities to do such optimization because the volumes flowing all over this large distance between the company and the city, that's a large distance. It's a large distance and small volumes per company are flowing over it. So individually, companies would spend a lot of money to do it themselves. But if they aggregate their volumes with a 3PL, they use the same 3PL, the 3PL can find a lot of opportunities to optimize everything and have economies of scale. So this aggregation across customers is what enables 3PL to provide a cost-effective service, and that becomes very attractive for these companies, because sometimes a 3PL can do something for them at lower cost than the companies would need to do it themselves. So not only do the companies pay less money, the 3PL is more efficient, but also they have less hassle. The 3PL handles a lot of the work for them. So that's a very attractive proposition. You go to a company and you tell them, you have less hassle, I'll handle the job for you, plus it will cost you less to give me the job than it will take for you to do it yourself. So that is the main reason why 3PLs are popular and 3PLs exist and 3PLs are used. Let's talk about some benefits of 3PLs. Because 3PLs, the only thing they do is move, store stuff, and there's competition, there's multiple 3PLs. So 3PLs are always trying to improve their cost efficiency, because the more they improve their cost efficiency, the less price they could charge from their clients. And then if their prices are lower, they'll get more business. So that's how 3PLs compete with each other. So over time, they develop this skill set and capabilities to do logistics very efficiently. Okay. So companies, even small companies, growing companies, entrepreneurial ventures, or even just regular companies, they can get access to higher levels of logistic capabilities and assets through 3PL. So 3PLs provide them access to these capabilities and assets. Assets are things like warehouses, cross docks, right? Trucks, right? Material handling equipment. So logistics is a very capital intensive operation. And a company may say, I don't have the skill set to manage all this, but even if they had the skill set, they might say, I don't have the money to invest in all these resources, right? So a huge benefit of 3PLs is they give you access to capability as well as assets to all these companies who don't have to invest in these capabilities and assets. They reduce CapEx requirement, right? So imagine a company going into, that used to be a Michigan company, and now they want to do business on the West Coast. So they want to go to California, maybe Arizona, Maybe they want to go to, Oregon, Washington State, things like that along the West Coast, Idaho. And so in these new geographies, they are not sure how their product will do. If they are to buy their warehouses, buy their trucks, buy their material handling equipment, there's a huge capex requirement to expand into these new geographies. And many companies might say, well, we are not sure how our sales will be, so we're not going to go with this capex. Maybe we're not going to invest so much money. But 3PLs will come and say, don't invest anything. We're just going to charge you for the service we provide. So if you sell less, you move less, you pay us less, right? So they convert a huge fixed cost. They eliminate a huge fixed cost of expansion for the companies. They eliminate that. And in lieu of that, companies just pay a variable cost. And companies love paying a variable cost because they don't know how much sales they will have. So lower sales, you pay less. So that is a huge benefit that companies see with 3PL, both of these. Reduce cost for clients. So as we talked about, they have high utilization of assets. They have economies of scale because they aggregate demand for transportation and storage across many companies. Because of that aggregation, high utilization, economies of scale, they can, and their expertise. Also, don't forget, they have expertise because they do this for a living. Because of all of these factors, they have lower costs. Now, it's really key to understand why 3PLs have lower costs. Okay, so number one, and I could ask on an exam, okay, give me 3 reasons why 3PL are going to have lower cost than some companies. Okay, well, one, expertise. They are going to have expertise because they do this for a living. They're professionals. A lot of companies, logistics is not the main business. They're more interested in designing products, or they're more interested in other aspects, and they don't have as much logistics expertise. Number two, high utilization of assets. Why? Because they aggregate demand across multiple companies. Economies of scale, kind of similar point to utilization. Why? Again, aggregate demand across multiple companies, right? And so these are some reasons why 3PLs can have lower cost than the companies. So even once they mark up their cost, because they're not going to sell their service at cost, they want to make some money. So if their cost is $100 and they mark it up to $115 and charge the client $115, the client can still save money because it might be costing the client $120 or $125 to do the same thing in-house. Access to new logistics technologies. This is also really key because of the economies of scale and high volumes. It makes sense for 3PLs to invest in technologies because if they save a few cents of each item they move, that's going to pay back quickly because they move millions of items. So often 3PLs will have technologies before, especially companies which are not at the scale of Walmart or Costco or something like that. Companies which are smaller or don't have as much expertise as Walmart, they may not have all the latest technologies for logistics. So 3PLs may have a warehouse management system, a very advanced and a good one, a really good transportation management system. They might use RFID tags, and all of these will lead to efficiencies in their operations. Okay, and this is another reason why 3PLs can have a lower cost than other companies. So this will be reason number 4. So this economies of scale is number 3, right? So if I ask, why would 3PLs have lower cost? They are implementing new technologies, or the latest technologies also leads to efficiencies. Other benefits of 3PLs include a 3PL may have specialized product handling capabilities. So for example, if you have to ship hazardous materials, you may not have all the safety equipment and so forth. Or if you have to ship something in a cold chain, which means refrigerated products like ice creams or vaccines, things like that, because the volumes of such products may not be very high for a company. So imagine Kroger. Kroger handles a lot of volume, right? But if we just look at the frozen food section of Kroger, that's a fraction of the volume, the total volume that Kroger handles. So Kroger might say, for example, okay, I'm going to do my own logistics for the regular goods, but in frozen goods, my volumes are too small, okay, are too small to justify my investment into a cold chain. Cold chain means warehouses with refrigeration, trucks with refrigeration, containers with refrigerations called reefers, right? So Kroger might say, well, my frozen food volume is not enough for me to invest in the cold chain. Other stuff I'll handle myself, but for the frozen food stuff, I'll go to a 3PL. Now, why would it make sense for a 3PL to have, that frozen food handling capability? Because they might be handling frozen food for many different retailers. And so because they aggregate demand across retailers, they might have access to specialized product handling capabilities that regular companies might find expensive to develop. Efficient handling of product returns. Product returns are a big problem for a lot of companies because returns are sporadic, low volume, geographically spread. So even if a company is doing their own logistics, like let's say Walmart, right? So Walmart has the trucks that go to retail stores and deliver product. The returns from that store, there might be, small packages that might not be it might not be a good option to put them in a huge Walmart truck, some small loose packages which are product returns at a Walmart store. Walmart trucks may be very efficient at handling pallets, large pallets or large boxes, but the material handling equipment and all of that may not be well designed for small packages. So even sometimes for large companies, handling product returns is not easy. So 3PLs again can help here because they could be handling product returns for all of the companies in a particular geography, right? And then they could specialize in that, right? So some 3PLs, might specialize in small packages and they do returns. Some 3PLs might specialize in the cold chain. Okay, have reefers, refrigerated trucks, refrigerated warehouses, right? Because you don't need to have one 3PL that does everything for you. If you are the client, if you're Kroger, you may go to one 3PL to handle frozen, food. You may go to some other 3PL to handle product returns. Maybe people return some products to your stores and then they have to be shipped back to the manufacturer. So because 3PLs can specialize, right? And then you can hire more than one 3PL for different tasks. That specialization is reason number 5 why 3PLs can have, lower cost than it would cost the company to do the things in-house. Okay. So for example, Amazon Prime, Amazon has its own delivery vans in some areas where they do Prime deliveries, right? But even then, Amazon, even for Prime customers, does not have its own vehicles go and pick up product returns and handle product returns. It works with UPS and FedEx to do product returns, and probably USPS perhaps as well, right? And so these companies, USPS, FedEx, USPS, they act as a 3PL for Amazon Prime to handle product returns. What are some cons of 3PL? Now we've seen there were a lot of benefits, right? It looked like a very rosy picture. Let me try to draw a flower. So it looked like a very rosy picture that we have so many benefits. Are there any cons to using 3PL? If you are using 3PL, if you're using 3PL for a major chunk of your logistics or most of your logistics, then logistics cannot be a source of competitive advantage anymore. Your competitors can hire a similar or the same 3PL. So if you are competing on logistics, maybe using a 3PL for most of, this only applies if you're using 3PL for most of your logistics needs. Then you're not really able to differentiate yourself from competitors. If you are like Kroger and you do a lot of things efficiently in-house and you have expertise in logistics, but maybe for frozen food you use 3PL, then you can still compete on logistics expertise. But if you just outsource all of your logistics, then it kind of stops being a source of competitive advantage. So you have to be careful, think about your strategy while you decide how much to outsource to 3PLs. Most companies will outsource some amount, some tasks to 3PLs. It's called a mixed strategy. You do something in-house, something you outsource. So a lot of companies will do like a mixed strategy. But if you outsource most of your logistics needs, then it has to be, it's almost a strategic decision at that point, and you have to be careful, what your source of competitive advantage is. Service level commitment may not be realized. So, 3PLs deal with many customers. Maybe they promised you, we will deliver within 3 days. Storm comes, some of their trucks, just slip, have accidents, their trucking capacity is reduced, or, some areas the storm is so heavy you can't drive. All right. And so they have various customers who want to use their trucks to move product. Who are they going to prioritize when some of their trucks are kind of stuck in the storm, and so they have less trucks to draw upon? If you are not their largest customer or their most loyal customer or something like that, maybe they will not prioritize your company. And that is when a service level commitment may not be realized. They may have promised you 3 days, but in those days, they might be taking 7 days to deliver your product. Okay. So what can you do? You might say, okay, maybe in my contract it says 3 days, so I'm going to sue them, I'm going to do X, I'm going to do Y. Oftentimes the contracts are written on average. So the contract might say on average you have to deliver on 3 days, because it's very hard to promise somebody that every single delivery is going to be within a certain time scale. So, contracts often will allow for exceptional circumstances, so you might not be able to do much. So there is that, and it's related to this loss of control. There is a loss of control when you outsource, and sometimes, that can hurt you. There are situations where you may not be prioritized by the 3PL, even though you need them to prioritize you, because you have to meet certain customer service requirements. Okay. You have a dependence on an external company now. So if this 3PL goes out of business, which has happened in 2008 financial crisis, there were 3PLs that went out of business because this was a recession, people were consuming less. So some of the 3PLs, their pricing, the amount they were charging their clients had been developed as assuming a high level of utilization. So maybe these 3PLs, they were getting a utilization of 95% of their assets, and they did their pricing with the clients. They had a contract with the client to give them these warehousing services, transportation services at very low prices. Recession comes, demand, overall consumption in the economy falls, utilization for these 3PLs falls. Now they're being utilized at 70%. So their fixed costs are not being split up across many, many different activities because they're doing less trips, less storage of goods, and so forth. Some 3PLs went out of business. So you completely rely on this one company to handle logistics for you, and now because of some external shock, they're going bankrupt. Or they stop servicing certain areas. They say, because other customers have left us, or other customers have gone out of business, or something has happened to 3PL's other customers, they're no longer going to serve this geographic region. And so you were relying on them to serve customers in that geographic region. So now this dependence on that external entity is going to cost you, because now you have to go find another 3PL, right, and negotiate with them, and they may give you higher rates because they know you're out of options and so forth. Sometimes the 3PLs available to you are not that good. This is often a problem when you're thinking outside the North American context. So think about selling your product in Africa, selling your product in developing markets in Asia, right? In some regions, logistics infrastructure, okay, is not as advanced. And in countries where logistics infrastructure is not as advanced, often you'll see that 3PLs have lower capabilities as well. So it's overall, the logistics market is not as mature, the logistics service market, which is a 3PL, the market 3PL operates in. You can get logistics services, but they don't have all the capabilities that you expect to see in North America. They may not have, tracking of the products to that extent. They may take longer. Their warehouse handling might be very manual, and it might take way longer, things like that. Security concerns. Because 3PLs handle, products from so many different customers, if most of the customers of a 3PL, the products don't need a high level of security, but yours do, how much is the 3PL going to invest in security just for one client? So sometimes, going with a 3PL might be a little bit more risky from a security standpoint, just because they are not as, locked up or secured up as you would like them to be, because the other clients they handle, the products are not that expensive. Lack of incentive alignment. Whenever you're dealing with an external party, are your and their incentives aligned? Are they paid based on performance? Do they have to perform to get some sort of a bonus or something? What is the contract like? This really has to deal with how the contract is, right? If there is no incentive alignment, you just think of them as a cost center. They just do the bare minimum and you pay them the cost. Sometimes you'll find that they may not act in your best interest. And then even though you outsource to 3PLs, you're still going to need to do a lot of work. You have to manage the relationship with the 3PL. So what does that involve? That involves negotiation at step one. You have to negotiate a deal with them. Okay, then it involves contracts. You have to write a contract, and there's contractual obligations. And then it involves day-to-day management of the relationship. Did you pay them on time? Did your customers have complaints that you took up with the 3PL and resolve those complaints? So this day-to-day management of the relationship. There's a lot of work still you have to do, and you still have to integrate your IT with theirs. So the client company's IT system needs to be able to talk to the IT system of the 3PL. Okay. And here there's some help. So business to business software, there are certain standards. So if their software follows those B2B software standards and your software follows those standards, then they have like protocols they can share data on. So sometimes it's not hard, but again, something you have to look into, right? And make sure it's there. So there is still, it's not that you outsource and then you can just sit and relax. There is still work involved. So how do companies use 3PL? So this is coming from a survey of companies in the US. Basically, the author of the textbook that I sometimes recommend, which is called Supply Chain Management or Logistics Perspective. That author, one of the authors is John Langley Jr. at Penn State. John did this research survey, right? And I don't know how many companies responded, but companies responded. And the companies, one of the questions the companies answered was, what 3PL services do they use? Because when you go to talk to a 3PL, you don't have to use every single service the 3PL provides. You could say, okay, I like service 1, service 2, but I don't need service 3 and 4, and maybe I need service 8 that on your menu. So give me just these services. So a lot of companies, 86% were using 3PLs for transportation. And that doesn't mean they were using a 3PL for 100% of their transportation, right? You may use private trucks over routes where you have a lot of volume flowing upon, but other routes where the volume flow is reduced or less due to less demand, you might outsource those to a 3PL. So there's, on some routes, a lot of companies, 86% use 3PLs. A lot of companies, about 2/3, use 3PL for warehousing. That does not mean, again, that they use the 100% of the warehousing for these 66% companies is being done by 3PLs. Sometimes companies will use, and the company I worked for did the same thing. We had our own warehouses, but in peak sales seasons, our warehouses will be out of capacity and we will go to 3PL for excess capacity. So in the peak selling season, the last quarter of the year, November, December, October, peak sales season, before the season started, we would, negotiate a capacity with the 3PL. You give us this many cubic feet of space, and then we would move extra product that would arrive in August, September for the sales season to the 3PL warehouses as an overflow storage area. So some of the product would come to our warehouses, but as our warehouses would get full, we would use the 3PL as an overstock area. Some companies will outsource all of their warehousing, have not a single warehouse internally, just use 3PLs for all the warehousing. But a lot of companies, 2/3, are using the warehousing services of 3PLs. About the same, 60%, a little bit less, but almost 2/3 also rely on 3PLs for international transportation. That is complicated. You have to deal with customs clearance, you have to deal with certain paperwork, port charges, dealing with international shipping carriers, dealing with intermodal transportation. You have to take goods to a port, right? So some companies just say, let's just outsource this. The 3PL knows what are the fair rates. They can negotiate fair prices. 3PL is obviously working with larger volumes for multiple clients. Maybe they can negotiate better rates at ports and ships and so forth. So almost 2/3 of the companies also using 3PL for internal transportation. And then it falls down. So freight forwarding, 44%. And we'll talk about freight forwarding in a while. This is a type of 3PL service where 3PL does not own the assets, but they go to other companies and book everything for you. It's kind of like those intermodal marketing companies in the 1970s who would go to a trucking company and a rail company and another trucking company and negotiate with 3 companies to give you intermodal transportation from door-to-door service. So that's kind of like freight forwarding. Freight forwarder would say, okay, tell me where do you have to ship goods from point A, where do they need to go point B, and this could be in a different country. This could be, in Mauritania. So that might be a country you may not have heard of. So you can Google that. It is a real country, you didn't make it up. So maybe you need to ship something to Mauritania and you're shipping from Michigan. Okay. So this shipment might require multiple modes of transportation. It might use truck, and then it might go to a port. From a port, it might be on a ship to the port in Morocco. If Mauritania doesn't have a port, then Morocco, it might go by rail somewhere, then another truck, right? So multiple things would need to be stitched together for this transportation. A freight forwarder would not own their own trucks. They would not own their own railroad or their own shipping vessels, but they would, optimize the route, find the best route, and then they would find the companies which operate on those routes and negotiate with them and set up a whole nice package for you. So companies will use freight forwarders for complex routes where you have to deal with multiple companies on the same route to get product A to B, right? And so freight forwarding, that's also used by almost half the companies, 44%. Customs clearance, about less than half companies, 42%, and then it goes less and less and less, and then you can look at that, right? This one actually surprised me. So this one I don't believe, actually. I don't think so few companies are using 3PLs for reverse logistics, which is, shipping back defective items, repair, return. I think this percentage is much more higher, maybe closer to 70% or more. And the reason it has showed up in the survey as 23% is that sometimes respondents don't consider USPS, Postal Service, UPS, and FedEx. These are often not considered 3PLs in the way we use language. So, when people talk about FedEx, USPS, Post Office, they think of them as package carrier, as consumer level services. They don't think of them as 3PLs, although technically by the definition of a 3PL, when you're moving product that belongs to other companies and you don't own that product, you're kind of like in a 3PL role. And so a lot of these package carrier and postal companies provide reverse logistics services, moving product returns back to manufacturers and so forth. Okay. And so I think the survey respondents they might be using USPS, United States Postal Service, they might be using FedEx, but it didn't come to their mind that FedEx and USPS are actually 3PLs. And they just said, no, we don't use 3PL because they thought FedEx is not 3PL. So I think that is something that's going on because, some people in the way they use language, they don't think of FedEx and UPS as 3PL services. And so that's why this is low, although I believe a lot of companies do use these sort of options for reverse logistics. So I don't think this percentage is correct. Okay. But anyway, the top ones do seem correct. It seems these are very popular services that companies outsource to 3PLs, and this one should be one of them. Okay. When we talked about the benefits of 3PLs, we talked about how a company that doesn't need to do CapEx, it doesn't need to develop its own capabilities, and so on and so forth. So that kind of sounds like that only small and medium-sized companies use 3PLs and large companies don't use 3PLs. But this is a really key point. Large companies do use 3PL. So, who's going to be larger in retail than Walmart and Procter and Gamble in consumer goods, right? So they're some of the largest companies. So they use 3PLs. Why? They have their own, assets. They have their own warehouses, their own trucks. Why would they use 3PL? To use a mixed strategy, right? On some routes, it might not be feasible to use your own assets. So for those routes, you might use a 3PL. Or when the sales spike, let's say this is a high sales season. It's the high sales season, right? And your own assets are kind of, out of capacity. They're close to 100% utilization. So you go, use 3PLs as an overflow option, right? So mixed strategy, which is using a combination of your own assets and 3PLs, can often, provide and it can often lead to more optimal outcomes for you as a company. So you might be able to achieve the same level of customer service at a lower total cost, or achieve an increased level of customer service at the same cost by using a mixture of your own assets and capabilities and 3PLs. Types of 3PLs. There are asset-based providers and non-asset-based providers, and really you need to know just the key difference between them is that asset-based 3PLs, they invest in equipment and facilities. Okay, so they actually own warehouses and trucks, equipment, warehouses, trucks. They might even own shipping vessels, right, that go in the oceans. So they actually own this stuff. They also employ a lot of workers. Right? To run these trucks and warehouses and all of these things. They're called asset-based. They have their own assets. You also have non-assets-based providers, which are kind of like the freight forwarders we talked about. These are just coordinators. They don't have their own trucks, their own warehouses. But what they will do is they'll say, okay, you need these services. They will find the affordable options for you, and they will string together a bunch of contracts. So 3PL number 1 will do the transportation from here to here. 3PL number 2 will provide the storage solution. 3PL number 3 will do the shipping from the port in the US to the port in Mauritania or something like that. So they will string together multiple companies, negotiate the contracts with them, set everything up, monitor that everything is going smoothly. So they're like coordinating the whole flow for the client, but they don't have their own assets in play. And that's the main difference. So what do they offer? If they don't have assets, what are they offering? They're offering coordination. They're offering their expertise. They're offering their knowledge of, which routes, which companies operate, which is a good company, which is more reliable, which is less reliable. They're offering tracking services because they can integrate their IT system with the various IT systems of the 3PLs and then give you all the updates in one place. They might optimize the route for you. They might have software to do route optimization for you. So they're basically providing knowledge and expertise and coordination, right? So if I ask you on the exam, why would anybody go to a non-asset based 3PL? Because, if a company doesn't have assets, why would they go to another company which does not have assets? Right? Asset-based 3PLs make sense. Why do non-asset-based 3PL exist? So the answers will be that non-asset-based 3PLs provide us with intangibles that are important, like knowledge. They have knowledge of the routes, which companies work best, which to coordinate with. They have expertise in negotiating contracts and in tracking shipments and so forth. They do a coordinating roles. They can do a lot of stuff with paperwork, with customs clearance, with processing and auditing freight bills, with keeping everything in tip-top shape on the paperwork and tracking front. Okay, so still they provide all of these resources and capabilities, which is why it still makes sense to go to them. Why would you choose an asset-based over a non-asset-based, or a non-asset-based over asset-based? Here are the pros and cons. Okay, non-asset-based are viewed as more flexible. Okay, why? Because they have access to the assets of all the 3PLs out there. They can contract with any 3PL willing to do business with them and use their assets. So they have, access through contracting to a much larger asset base than an asset-based 3PL provider who tend to be limited to using mostly their own assets. Sometimes asset-based 3PLs, when they're out of their own assets, or they don't have assets in a particular geography, will also outsource to another 3PL in that geography, in that region. But usually they are biased towards keeping a high utilization on their own existing assets. So these guys will often be viewed as more flexible because they can go to anybody, and because they work regularly with other companies, they have relationships with other companies, the non-asset based ones. Because the asset-based 3PL only has to go outside to other companies once in a while, right? Once in a while, they may not have the strong relationships a non-asset based provider has. So they're still in a way a little bit less flexible. They're mostly limited to their own assets. These will not be biased towards using a particular asset. If it's more useful to store your goods in warehouse A versus warehouse B, the non-asset based provider, like a freight forward type of company, they will book you with warehouse B because that's more useful for you. But an asset-based provider, if they have warehouse A in a particular state, and you want to send something, you want to store inventory to support sales in a nearby state, they might just move your product to that warehouse A because that's the closest warehouse they have to your market. They don't have any other warehouse very, very close to your market. And so they're not going to open a new warehouse just for you, probably. And so they will have a bias towards relying on their own assets because they really must keep a high utilization of their assets to make money. Okay. So these were kind of like the flexibility and the non-bias towards which assets are used, kind of like pros of non-asset based providers. The pros of asset-based providers are they're more reliable. They can assign specific trucks, specific areas in a warehouse to a particular client. They'll say, okay, client A has a certain volume flowing through our system. Let's just set aside these warehouse shelves for client A. We can have custom design shelves for like custom shelves that client A needs because we have enough volume from client A to justify that. This percentage of our trucking fleet is gonna just work on client A unless client A's demand falls, and then we'll move the trucks to some other client. So they can be very reliable because if you are an important client for them and you give them enough volumes, they will set aside resources just for you, and then you will have first priority on those resources. It's easier to coordinate and track goods if you're working with one company versus here they could outsource the task to stitching together like 4 companies in one job. So you have to kind of coordinate and get information from 4 different companies. Much more easier to coordinate and track goods with just one company. Greater visibility, as most of the time your goods are within their own assets. So most of the time the client's goods are in the 3PL's warehouse, in the 3PL's trucks. And because the 3PL obviously tracks their trucks and tracks their warehouses, you can see exactly where your product is. If you're a freight forwarder type of 3PL and you have just outsourced to various 3PLs, then you may not have real-time updates about where exactly the product is. So there are advantages to asset-based 3PLs. There are advantages to non-asset-based 3PLs. They're kind of like opposites. The advantages here become like disadvantages here, correspond to disadvantages here. and the advantages on the asset-based side correspond to disadvantages on the non-asset-based side. So they're kind of like, opposites of each other in that respect. Okay, so you might have heard this term, or if not, you might hear it eventually. Why stay at 3 PLs? Could we have 4 PLs? And yes, there are 4 PLs. Lead logistic providers, as they're called. Think about 4PL as just being a supercharged 3PL where they do more than a 3PL. What is the more that they do? They basically handle your whole supply chain. They're called the supply chain integrator. They're going to manage your entire supply chain, okay? And while managing your supply chain, they might make use of multiple 3PLs. That's why they call it 4PL. Because instead of you having to deal with multiple 3PLs, right? You may have 3PL number 1 working in region 1. You may have 3PL number 2 working internationally. You may have 3PL number 3 working in India, right? So you may be coordinating with multiple 3PLs. Even within the same region, you may have one 3PL for frozen goods because this 3PL specializes in a cold chain, and you have another 3PL for non-frozen goods. So a company might end up dealing with like 10 3PLs internationally. So 4PL says, let me handle it. You just deal with me. I will handle your entire supply chain, all 3PLs, all the organization of your supply chain. Not only do they do what 3PLs do, which is move stuff around, store stuff, but this is really key. They take a much broader role. Okay, what is that broader role? They are gonna collect data, give you reports on performance of your supply chain. They're gonna come up with ideas to improve your supply chain. Because the 4PL is basically running your whole supply chain, you can't just have an arm's length relationship with the 4PL. They're too important. They're a strategic partner now. So you have to have a joint venture with them or a long-term contract. Otherwise, incentives will not be aligned. And a 4PL, you can't just, think of them as just a regular outsourcing operation. Okay. Sometimes 3PL will set up a group of logistics specialists, which will be the 4PL organization within their own setup, give them a separate office, and then they start coordinating for you. And then this group of logistics professionals will be the 4PL for a client. And this group of logistics professionals, they will use the 3PL they're located in, but they'll also use other 3PLs and do other work. Tasks of a 3PL will often include optimizing the logistics network for the client. 3PLs don't do that. You tell 3PL, okay, take my product from point A to point B. 3PL will not ask, okay, why do you have it in point A in the first place? Maybe you should have it in a different point. 3PLs will not ask you that. They're not usually. 4PLs will, their role is to optimize your whole supply chain. They will give you suggestions, okay, do this, or this, not give you suggestions because they're managing it. They'll just do it, but they'll tell you, okay, we're going to do it this way because of this reason. They will coordinate with your suppliers. They'll do pickups. They'll manage inbound, outbound logistics. They'll coordinate with multiple 3PLs to get all the capabilities we need. They will collect, analyze, and share data with the client. They'll collect this data from 3PLs that they outsource to, as well as their own assets that they use. They will do project management. So if they say, okay, it's really useful for you to open a new warehouse in Kansas City, they will help you manage that project and open that warehouse. They can do inventory management for you. They can handle reverse logistics, product returns for you. So basically, other than choosing your suppliers and managing your suppliers, other than supplier management, they pretty much take over your whole supply chain, which is scary and useful at the same time. It's scary because you're basically outsourcing a key function of the whole your organization to them. You're kind of handing over a lot of your key responsibilities as a company to an outside company. That's kind of the scary part. And then, the good part is that if the outside company has a lot of expertise and you don't, then you just optimize your supply chain without having to develop that expertise. So that's the advantage. So how do you reduce the scariness? Maybe you do a joint venture with them, a long-term contract with them, so they know that they have money in the game. They're going to make money off you, off the work they do for you as well, and they're motivated to kind of work for you. So you want to make sure that happens. 4PLs will be used by companies who do not have supply chain expertise themselves. Right? So if you are an entrepreneur, for example, if you are an existing company, you are just not doing very good at supply chain, something like that, you could just go to a 4PL, take care of everything for you, and they're usually good at it because they have been at it. They do it for a living. They've been doing it for a long time. However, that your costs are going to go up. They're going to charge you a markup, obviously, right? So if you just went to 3PLs directly, your cost might be less than going to a 4PL, because for the 3PLs obviously add their own markup, but they also save you costs from aggregation benefits and specialization benefits and high utilization and all of those good things, right? So the 3PL do add a markup, but even then they have very competitive rates. But a 4PL is going to add a markup on top of that. So, if you just dealt with 3PLs yourself directly, instead of going through a 4PL, you would have less cost. Going to a 4PL is going to cost you money, but then again, it's going to give you that supply chain expertise to optimize your whole supply chain if you don't have that expertise. So why stop at 4? Can we have 5PLs? If you're a person who shaves, you might know about the Mach 3 shaving razors that Gillette sells. They used to have one razor, and then they added 2 and it became Mach 2 and then Mach 3, and then I think they skipped 4 and went to Mach 5, and who knows, maybe they're going to come up with Mach 7, right? So just like that, companies trying to differentiate themselves, and we had 3PLs, and then some of these 3PLs said we could do more for our clients. We can provide more integrated end-to-end solutions. We can do more for clients. So let's become 4PLs and do everything about supply chain, pretty much everything for our clients. And the next thing is, can they become 5PLs, right? Who knows, maybe they can. There's no uniform understanding of what a 5PL is. Okay, some 4PLs type of operations, if they do a little bit more than usual, they might start calling themselves 5PL just for the marketing fad, and sometimes companies which work on behalf of 3PLs, because 3PLs don't have all the assets. A 3PL is not going to have trucks and aircraft and ships that do international shipment, international trade, all of those things within its own company. 3PLs also need, to book air capacity, international shipping carrier capacity, and so forth. So some of the 3PLs will get together and make this organization called the 5PL, where this organization will negotiate transportation rates with shipping carriers and air carriers on behalf of all of the member 3PLs. So sometimes that, high-level organization that's just negotiating lower transportation rates for multiple 3PLs is sometimes called a 5PL. But there's no clear understanding on what a 5PL is. Sometimes a 4PL starts calling themselves 5PL. Sometimes a 5PL doesn't deal with clients directly. They're just trying to negotiate cheaper transportation rates for their member 3PLs. And so, I'm not going to test you for this. This slide will not be tested. Okay, I'm not going to ask you on the homework or the exam what's a 5PL. So you can ignore this whole slide, but I just wanted to point out that you might hear this term and there's no standard definition. It could just be a 4PL++, or it could be a 5PL that's working for 3PLs to negotiate better transportation rates for them. Okay, are there 1PLs and 2PLs? Once the term 3PL and then 4PL became famous, people started doing things in-house as 1PL. So if you are a company, you do your own logistics stuff, you are like doing it 1PL. So you think about Walmart. Walmart has its own trucking fleet to distribute product from its distribution centers to its retail stores. So for that part of the supply chain, Walmart is a 1PL, just single party. Walmart's distribution centers, Walmart's employees, Walmart trucks, Walmart's truck drivers, Walmart's employees at the retail store, they're offloading the truck. Everything in this activity is all belonging to Walmart. All the employees, all the equipment, all the trucks, all the warehouses. So it's 1PL, there's just one party operating in this area, in this part of the supply chain. 2PL would be the initial days where companies would contact a transportation company to move goods for them. So let's say you are a company and you hire a trucking company that comes to your warehouse. You load the truck, it's your employees, but the trucking company's driver drives the truck, and the truck belongs to the trucking company, and they take the goods to some other area where you want the goods to be, and then your employees or your customers' employees offload the goods there. So now we have two parties. One party is you're loading the truck, you're organizing the shipment, and the second party is just moving the goods in the truck. So that's called a two-party system, or a 2PL setup right? So it could be, examples would be Walmart asking UPS to handle product returns of items sold on walmart.com. So for this part of the supply chain, UPS does everything for Walmart, and it's a 2PL situation. There's no third party which is, integrating information or booking capacity or negotiating on behalf of party one, like a 3PL usually does. 3PL does a lot more than just move stuff around in a 2PL type of fashion. And we talked about all of that, right? They deal with other carriers, with other outside capacity. They do route planning. They will find the cheapest route, which assets to use, which warehouse to store your goods in, and make all those decisions for you as well, which a 2PL does not do. 2PL just does exactly what you tell it. So if you tell 2PL move something from point A to point B, 2PL just goes, picks it up, and moves it. Okay, 3PL does more than that, and 4PL does even more than that. Okay.